suppose Pope Francis declares by the power of his office tomorrow that there is no such thing as papal infallibility, or he denies the Immaculate Conception. What do you do tomorrow when that happens, if it happened?
Well, so I mean,
what does the church do?
I'm inclined to think that if a pope carried out an act that had all the trappings of a formal ex cathedra pronouncement,
and he clarifies, right? Because people say, "Hang on, was this
right?"
you
he
acting
says, "Oh,
as
you bet I
Peter?"
was."
And he says,
right?
"Yeah,
You bet I was." Right? You bet I was declaring solemnly and so on. And he teaches some heresy, right? Something that is, you'd have to be even more dishonest than people already are, right? To deny that this was a heresy. I mean, suppose he says, appealing to my full authority as successor of the apostles, I hereby declare and define that Jesus of Nazareth was not divine, or something like that, right? I'm inclined to say that would falsify Catholicism. I'm inclined to say that the teaching on papal infallibility, here's a case where it makes an empirical prediction that this will not happen. Therefore, if that happened, we would have a falsification of Catholic claims. For that reason, I would say it's never going to happen.
Yeah,
it will not
the
happen.
bones of Jesus showing up.
Exactly right. Yeah, some people I think are afraid to go there. I would say, well, why? First of all, I think it's an implication of the doctrine. If it's an implication of the doctrine, just embrace it. Okay. But second of all, Christianity bases itself on miracle claims, like the one you're alluding to, the claim that Christ was resurrected. And that has empirical repercussions.
Yeah.
One of them is that Christ's bones will never be discovered.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're already embracing empirical claims there. You're opening Catholicism up to empirical falsification. Here's another way in which is open to empirical falsification. Another way that I think it could be falsified, when I say could be, I don't mean, this could happen I don't think it will ever happen, but in principle would be if a pope doesn't do that, but let's say he teaches some other doctrinal error in a less solemn way, and initially it's very controversial, stirs up division in the church, but gradually it settles in. Those who hold to the older opinion kind of die out, and 100, 200 years pass or what have you, and now it becomes settled Catholic teaching, but it conflicts with everything that was said before, and it conflicts with Scripture, even if it's not something that's been formally defined. I would say that would falsify Catholicism. So to give you an example, and this is when I'm known for this topic, everybody thinks, this is, I'm capital punishment boy, right? Everybody thinks that's my...
You used to be Dawkins whipping boy. That was much more fun.
Yeah. And I would much rather not talk about this topic, but it always comes up, and few people are talking about it. So I'll use it as an example. I mean, in my opinion, if it were to become settled Catholic teaching, unambiguously taught that the death penalty is always and inherently of its very nature immoral, that it's tantamount to murder, that it's no different from abortion, that it's no different from just shooting an innocent guy when you're robbing a bank or something. And that became settled. There was no controversy about it anymore. 100 years from now, my book on capital punishments, it's disintegrated to dust. Everybody's forgotten it and so on. And all the other controversy over it's gone, right? And everybody's just like, we all teach that, right? We all know that, and all disagreement is gone. I would say that would falsify Catholicism, because that just conflicts with scriptural teaching. So if the church teaches that Scripture cannot teach moral and theological error, and it also teaches that the unanimous understanding of Scripture that was had by the fathers of the church, and that the church has always had, cannot be in error, and the church does teach those things, then, well, I mean, we can conclude from that much that Scripture teaches that the death penalty can, in principle, be a licit punishment. It doesn't say you always must use it. It doesn't say you ever have to use it, but that in principle it can be a legitimate punishment. So if the church ends up teaching clearly and unambiguously that no, capital punishment is inherently and of its very nature evil, right? Okay, you've got a breach with the magisterium. You've got with Scripture, the fathers, and this is fathers who themselves were not in favor of capital punishment. There were a number of who rejected it in practice, but nevertheless acknowledged that Scripture permits it. And every pope who's spoken on it up until Benedict XVI has allowed, even when they were personally hostile, and there have been a couple who've been personally hostile to it, but they allowed it could be permissible in principle, right? So if you have the later magisterium directly contradicting 2,000 years of papal teaching, 2,000 years of magisterial teaching more generally, scripture itself, the claims of Catholicism have been falsified. Now, is that going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. But it could happen in the sense that we can imagine a scenario where Catholicism is open to falsification that way. But the claims of Catholicism also predict that will not, in fact, happen.
Yeah.
So there's ambiguity on that particular issue right now. I think people, a lot of people like to think, oh, this will never be reversed. Really? So the older teaching was around for 2,000 years, and now somehow that's been reversed. But the teaching of the last 20 minutes will never be reversed. That's a very historically short-sighted view, and it's too deferential to the conventional wisdom that prevails right now in the world and the church. And conventional wisdom can change fairly quickly, historically speaking. So, but in any event, I would say that will not happen. I think that will be righted at some point in the next, I don't know, in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Honorius wasn't condemned by his successor, Pope Leo, for 40 years. So that took a while, but it did happen. And but once it happened big time, because he was not only condemned by his successor as like a one-off thing. It's not like they did that and then moved on. They didn't move on. You had 3 successive church councils over the course of many years, over many decades. It's like they kept bringing it up. You had popes for centuries, when they would take the oath, would, among other things they would say, would condemn Honorius or would cite him as like, this is what you don't want to do. And that only kind of dropped out of practice when the Protestant Reformation, or the Protestant Revolution, came around. And it was a kind of Protestants would make Honorius a whipping boy to beat or a cudgel to beat the papacy with. So the problem of Honorius kind of like receded into historical memory. But nevertheless, though the condemnation took a few decades to happen, once it did, it took very deep root for many centuries. So anyway, I would say that would be another way in which Catholicism could be falsified, but I think will not be falsified.
Right. Okay, well, let's stay on this. If it is falsified tomorrow, because, I mean, you're basing your belief that the church will not officially teach heresy on your belief that the Catholic Church is Christ's church. If it's not, therefore can teach heresy and does tomorrow, what do you do? Do you go on a bender? Do you become a Jew? I mean, you seem to think you have arguments for God's existence. Do you become Protestant? Or do you just fall into a midlife crisis? And
well, I honestly have no doubt that it's not going to happen.
But wouldn't I?
I know you're
you'd be
saying,
willing to entertain if Christ's bones showed up just for fun. And
Yeah,
I'm
right,
saying
right.
It's not very fun. But
Right. Well, I mean, to me, it's kind of like asking me, what are you going to do if your wife leaves you, or
I could tell
your
you,
children?
I would go on a bender and die with my liver completely rotted. I'm pretty sure that's what I'd do.
Well, and that's a prediction, I imagine, and not a plan. So,
that's right.
So I've been taking the question as like a question about a plan rather than a prediction.
Yeah. Okay, good.
If you're asking me, I'm not asking you what you would plan to do. I'm asking you what
you're a philosopher. I love that we're distinguishing between plan and prediction.
You can enjoy. My family doesn't enjoy it so much. It's hard for. Well, do you mean by this? If you mean a prediction, I'm sure it would be a tremendous blow. It wouldn't falsify Christianity. If by Christianity we just mean, as a bare minimum, the idea that Christ was divine, he was resurrected from the dead, he taught these things that we know to be infallibly true, and so on. But on the other hand, I mean, to my mind, Christianity and Catholicism are continuous.
Yeah.
And I see no offense to my Protestant and Orthodox friends, and I have tremendous respect for many of them. But nevertheless, I tend to see non-Catholic forms of Christianity as just incomplete or deficient or defective forms of Christianity. So, to me, it's Catholicism is the true religion, and these other forms of Christianity are sort of offshoots of it. But nevertheless, should the distinctively Catholic claims about the papacy be falsified, that wouldn't by itself suffice to falsify, say, the resurrection and other
Yeah.
Christian teachings. So I imagine as a prediction, not as a plan, I guess I might start wondering, okay, is was I wrong about
Back to the drawing board.
orthodoxy
Yeah.
but again, that's not a plan because I just don't,
gotcha.
to me, it's so, the logical structure of the Catholic faith
Yeah.
and of the rational basis for it is, to me, it's like a fortress. And so I just don't think that's going to happen.
Good. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.